Yeah. My next question is about zDex. Like you mentioned earlier, like Pivians have really high expectation in zDex. Based on the description, trading fees from zDex will be rewarded to zDex nodes, as you mentioned. Like I would like to have more detailed information how the master nodes help secure zDex, and like what would the anticipating transaction fee for zDex? Like have dev team already came up with a simulation for the transaction fee? Yeah.
So this goes to our conversation before being live. That's a the information that I have about zDex is very minimal, right? This goes to our conversation before. So this is one of those questions to say, it's a great question. Information about that. This is let's get the developers in, after this call. And if people have those questions, let's begin to prepare those, get that for you and for the larger community to say, hey, here's what you can expect, coming down the line. Because above that, I honestly, I do not know at this point. So I can't speak critically and with integrity to what the transaction fees, like what those fees are going to look like, how those masternodes are actually securing the zDex. That would be a brilliant question for the developers to be able to chime into. And so for viewers who are watching, I will take that upon myself to go back into PIVX and say, let's accumulate that documentation. If we can now, the developers might not be ready to release that, right? So that could be part of it to say, hey, they're not ready to release that information for XYZ reason. But at least we can then provide that back to you and say, here's when we can expect it, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we can just get an answer on that whenever it's ready.
Yeah.
It is okay to.
And part of it as well is I think because there's a lot coming in Q1 for PIV and PIVX, right, on the roadmap. So a lot of the energy focus is on meeting the goals of Q1. From all of the protocol bumps and core technologies, whether it's zDex or not zDex, whether it's zPIV staking, the UX UI design, the governance, the voting proposal. So all of that right now is sort of the focus. And then zDex is Q2, so it's sort of a hey, we've got that 3-month span to really flesh out and begin to provide that information for everybody. That's my gut sense of right now. It's crucial go time for those Q1 roadmaps.
But you think the zDex will be on plan as it is stated in the website?
Yeah.
Q2 of 2018.
I mean, I can go out and say, looking at the past, past history of the developers of PIVX, from the core protocols and saying, here's what we want to do, here's when we're going to deliver. I've seen them come through time and time and time again of what they say they're going to do and meeting those, right? Meeting those deadlines and meeting those outlines of, yep, by the end of Q2, we'll have it. So I have full confidence in them of meeting that.
Okay. This following question will be about zDex as also. Like, zDex implies that it can immediately exchange PIVX to Bitcoin, right? Mm-hmm. So like, why is zDex so important for PIVX, right? Yeah. In case of masternode, it can be really important, but like, do you have a plan of zDex will eventually become the market for key currencies or coins such as Binance or KuCoin?
It's a good question. This came up actually when I was up in Toronto. When was that? Yesterday, 2 days ago. I'm losing track of time. One of the comments that came out was, man, it's so slow to send Bitcoin, right? Thankfully the transaction fees have come down. However, it's still it's not going to be. It takes time. It's not an instant transaction. It's not viable for your point of sale terminals, and it's not private, right? So this is what came out of having the ability, that importance of saying, hey, because PIVX transaction fees are so low, right? Because it's fast, you have the ability to basically exchange Bitcoin to Bitcoin, right? If you think about it, right? If I want to send Bitcoin from point A to point B, what's occurring right now is it's going from point A to point B. However, it's going about this fast, right? That's Bitcoin. And your transaction fees are, it's high. It's not as high as it has been, but it's fairly high, right? Especially for microtransactions. So what you're going to have the ability to do with zDex, again, this is the assuming that the transaction fees are going to be lower than exchanges, right? Or lower than any centralized type of entity. Why? Because the overhead's low. We're already running master nodes, et cetera, et cetera. You have the ability to put your Bitcoin in and go, oh, zPiv, and back out into Bitcoin, right? So at that point, because again, if I send Bitcoin into the zDex, convert for zPiv, doing basically an instant send, if you will, over to the receiver that then can back that out and send that fast, much quicker to a centralized exchange or whatever else it is, and exchange that for Bitcoin. Boom, your transaction just occurred faster, right? The transaction fees were lower. So what does that do for PIVX? It means it almost becomes an intermediary coin, right? It becomes the means of actually transferring your value, and it's done privately, right? So that's the other thing too. So it's not just it's fast, it's not just it's a lower transaction fee, it's privately. And I think when people begin to see, oh, this is really valuable. If I want to send X amount of value to somebody over there, Bitcoin, yeah, I have the Bitcoin, that might be my store of wealth, but when I actually want to transmit it, I can do it through zPiv. Why? Because it provides privacy, it's faster, and it's going to cost me less. Done, right? So thus, what does that do for PIVX? We can speculate. Trade volumes, right? If nothing else, all of a sudden you're going to see the volumes of trade go from being on exchanges to people holding it in their wallets, or hodling. If you want to say hodling, we can say hodling, right? So in their wallets, and thus they're empowering themselves. Why? Because, hey, maybe I want to be maybe I want to be a master node owner because I want to be able to help that ecosystem go, right? And so all of a sudden then demand for PIV goes up, right? The transactional volumes that are occurring within the network go up. And then this is the beautiful thing too, the economic model. Since we burn our transaction fees, right? So if you're minting zPiv, there's a fee. But if you're also sending normal PIV, there's a fee as well. And those are burned because we don't have to incentivize miners, right? Since our validators are getting the block reward, we don't have to pay miners. So we burn our transaction fees, which means the coin supply, right? That emission rate will be linear. However, the coin supply can start to go down and become deflationary. So thus, the value of the coin itself has that beautiful potential to rise and rise and rise.